It's been not only a big second day for the Republican convention, but even more details have emerged over the Secret Service blunders around the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, this new detail of an Iranian plot against the former president, and Joe Biden hitting the campaign trail. Let's bring in senior political reporter Trudy McIntosh. Well, great to have you, Trudy. I am very grateful and mindful that it's about 3 a.m. in the morning where you are, but it was a fantastic suite of Republicans today who took the stage, many, of course, who ran in the primaries against Trump, coming together in a big show of unity. Let's have a look.
Donald Trump has my strong endorsement, period. A vote for Joe Biden is a vote for President Kamala Harris. Let me remind you, Kamala had one job, and that was to fix the border. Now imagine her in charge of the entire country.
I say this as the kid of legal immigrants to this country. That means your first act of entering this country cannot break the law. That is why we will seal the southern border on day one. We will return you to your country of origin, not because you're all bad people, but because you broke the law.
Let's heed the call of our party's nominee to fight for these United States.
I didn't play it there, but I mean, Haley really went after the Biden record in foreign affairs. Ron DeSantis, well, he hit all the high notes on traditional values, the sort of arguments that win votes in the South. And Vivek Ramaswamy there, he went hard on the border chaos. I mean, speech after speech after speech. Geez, they fired up the crowd, Trudy.
Yeah, it's a Republican Party in Donald Trump's image, isn't it? I thought that was so emblematic watching Nikki Haley's speech here. Don't forget, in February, she said she didn't feel the need to kiss the ring and said she didn't like the fact that Republicans would publicly praise Trump and privately despise him. But here we are in July. She did exactly that last night. She clearly still has future ambitions within the Republican Party, and a party that's embraced Trump, she has to embrace that too. But the turning point for her was that assassination attempt we saw at the weekend. She didn't have a speaking spot prior to that. There'd been talk that she wouldn't even come to the convention, but as a result of that, she gets a prime time spot. Trump's watching on. All of Republicans and people more broadly, undecided voters, able to see that the two clearly have buried the hatchet in some sense.
There was also a speaker and mum talking about the fentanyl crisis in the States, and I looked as they panned around the crowd. Predominantly the women, tears in their eyes, some very emotional listening to that speech. I mean, clearly the Republicans want to fight with Biden over law and order. And of course, tomorrow, a bloke that grew up with drugs in his family, JD Vance, he'll take the stage for his first big set speech now as Donald Trump's running mate. What can we expect?
Well, this is his real opportunity to introduce himself to broader America. I'd point out he has relatively little experience for a vice presidential candidate. He only was elected to the Senate from Ohio back in 2022, but he's got an incredible log cabin story, and I expect we'll hear some of that tonight when he speaks. As you say, grew up in Ohio. He's a hillbilly heritage proudly. His mum had a drug addiction. He goes on to serve as a Marine, then becomes a venture capitalist, and now makes his way into politics. It's a fascinating story for him. Despite being a never Trumper in 2016, Trump's team believe he can help them in some of those Rust Belt states speak to the story of so many Americans struggling and that American dream that we hear so much about.
I might add, though, I mean, he has more experience than Obama, who was running for the top job. Vance is running for the second most important job, but I take your point. Criticism today too, Trudy, Secret Service really under fire for their handling of the assassination attempt. We haven't really had a credible explanation offered as to why that roof was unsecured, why someone was up there for as much as 26 minutes. The best that the head of the Secret Service could offer was that the roof was sloped. Have a listen.
Should that roof have been secure, period?
That building in particular has a sloped roof at its highest point. And so, you know, there's a safety factor that would be considered there, that we wouldn't want to put somebody up on a sloped roof.
And I read a stinging criticism from the journalist Andrew Neil, who was there when Reagan was shot, and he was highlighting the contrast between that shooting and Saturday, and he lamented the deterioration of the Secret Service, highlighting the fact that the head of Homeland Security, who runs the Secret Service, is a huge proponent of equality and inclusion hires rather than meritocracy, something that Megyn Kelly picked up. Have a listen.
It's so absurd to try to paint this as female empowerment. Is it female empowerment to take a bunch of women who are obviously unqualified for the job and let them publicly humiliate themselves and endanger the lives of a president? Diversity, equity, inclusion have no place in jobs that relate to safety and security. There was a woman in my townhouse unit who was about 6'2" and strong, and she was a Secret Service agent. Those are the only ones who should even be considered.
I have to say I agree with her. I mean, you're in DC. This reckoning of the Secret Service and Saturday, what's going on?
Well, there's growing calls, Peter, for the Secret Service Director, Kimberly Cheadle, to resign. We're hearing that from senior Republicans, including Ted Cruz. So far, she's yet to do that. She's doing a series of TV interviews like that disaster you saw there about the sloped roof. She's going to have to face sustained questioning, though. This next Monday coming up at Capitol Hill behind me, she's going to face congressional hearings. There's a number that are slated in the next week or so. The roof argument just defied credulity yesterday. Fine, if it's unsafe to be on a sloped roof, why then didn't they make sure nobody else could get on top of that roof? That was a clear vulnerability. We've also seen the blame game too in the last 24 hours, blaming local law enforcement. So, yeah, there's a long way to run on this story.
Of course, all this activity has forced Joe Biden to get out of his basement and campaign, something he has been slow to do. He was at an NAACP event. He was sitting down then with CBS. Let's have a listen.
If I had some medical condition that emerged, if the doctors came to me and said, you got this problem, that problem. But I made a serious mistake in the whole debate.
NAACP, I think I meant to say. You'd think if he's got a serious medical issue, that'd be about now, wouldn't it, Trudy?
Well, that comment really jumped out to me, Peter, because remember in his first interview since that big disastrous debate, he said only God Almighty could tell him to get out of the race. Here we are now. It's a mere mortal, just a doctor, and he says he would change his mind. That is an in for Democrats who have privately harbouring huge concerns about Joe Biden remaining on the top of the ticket. It's one thing to lose the presidency, lose a second term, but there are big down ballot implications that Democrats are really worried about. If you don't have turnout for a Democrat at the top of the ticket, what then happens in trying to flip the House, trying to maintain key Senate spots? So this is a huge problem. The assassination attempt on Trump just buried this conversation about Joe Biden's future, but it's certainly still bubbling away here in DC.
Right, just before I let you go and get some coffee to keep going, dire predictions. Democrats have got some shocking polls coming out from CNN showing the Republicans will win the White House in a landslide. Michigan's leaning red. Even Georgia, which flipped Democrat in 2020, is leaning Republican. They've got to be pretty demoralised at this point, don't they?
Yeah, the map is terrible if you're Democrats looking at that. But it seems like unless Joe Biden wants to go, he's not going anywhere. We saw yesterday as well here, they're trying to speed up that virtual nomination process. So there's 5 weeks until the Democrats have their convention. They want to lock this up in the next week or so to make it basically impossible to get rid of Biden from the ticket. They believe they can turn the polls around, but that's going to be a huge battle given the real concerns average Americans have about Joe Biden's fitness for office.
Well, yeah, well done there, Trudy. That's a good sweep of all the big issues there today in the States. Thank you for your time. I know it's early.